Paula, Sharon.
This is the third session of the June 2020 intensive on June 15th, 2020. We've been doing some dialoguing with one another before we turn the recording on, and we will be going to Facebook Live in a moment for 10-15 minutes, then going to a session where we'll be speaking about dialoguing about stumbling blocks. We will be opening it up for questions early on into our time together. Jay, anything else you want to say before we head over to Facebook Live?
Yeah, I was just, oh yeah, I suppose we could do that after, but you might not want it on the recording. I was just keen to know if anybody else had moved into name from last time.
I chose a new name just today, Lord of Lords, based upon that being one that I'm working on currently.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Casey, I see you've got Sanctify. That's new, isn't it?
Yeah, I got that one, and it does flow right off of, as Bill pointed out, I'm on a theme. God has me moving up higher in and sanctify. So I'm excited about this one.
Wow, it's very unusual. Yeah, it's the first time I've heard anyone say that name. That's really, it's very high priestly based.
I have some relationship to holiness, probably.
I was going to say, yeah, it's going to involve some of that. So purity, I'm going to step into maybe a little more holiness in that side. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Samson,
right? Because you go into that and then back to judging and back in and like a priest does. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Samson, don't worry about all those things, like even names is very advanced. You'll find most people have been doing this journey for years and wouldn't know their name. So yeah, a lot of these topics are, they're actually they're advanced because for a lot of the general population, because a lot haven't had the revelation, but because we've had this revelation for years, we now introduce it as more beginners and intermediates. And this is what happens generally in the process. So don't be discouraged at all, because you'll find that you'll end up having immense acceleration just even focusing on these topics. Okay, shall we?
I'm just thinking I was probably 3 months, half a year after I came into Heavenly Realms, or came to this house rather, before I identified my first new name. So yeah. Okay, so want me to turn the Facebook Live on here?
Or did Jane, do you want me to speak about this topic? We did have a question in the chat.
We will do that after we've done the Facebook Live.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll just do that first.
What do we want to call this topic, Jane?
Yes. So, what do you sense?
Well, it's going to head towards stumbling blocks, but is that where we're going on the Facebook Live, I guess, is the really big question.
Yeah, because it's still a stumbling block. Yes, maybe new revelation on stumbling blocks.
Okay, good. Okay, I can do that. Heading there. I put a brief advertisement on there about 5 minutes ago to let people know we're coming. Okay, new revelation about stumbling blocks. Okay. Okay, here we go. This is One United Body on June 15th, 2020. We're doing a brief Facebook Live before doing our third session of the June 2020 intensive. We wanted to do the first part of this on Facebook Live. Jane, did you want to start out?
Yes, welcome everyone. And today we have been led to talk about a whole range of new stumbling blocks that we've seen for the ecclesia. And we are in on the prophetic timetable. We have perceived in the phase of removing stumbling blocks from the ecclesia. The first phase was developing the intimacy, and next is stumbling blocks. And it can't be underestimated the importance of recognizing stumbling blocks on this journey. We all want to rush into all sorts of immense revelation, but until we know these, we can be knocked off the journey before we even realize. Triggers can go on immensely, and before we know it, we've done this or that, and we didn't even know it was a stumbling block. So this is why this house has a huge mandate to release them. We have a huge section on the website about how to do the journey. If you look at journey, that's so important as well. And the big picture, because the more you see the journey in the big picture, the more you will not make it about this or that, but you will keep on that journey, which we've seen is one of the biggest reasons we're here on a journey. We're not to take camp in certain elements of revelation. So just as you're listening, to operate out the tree of life, do listen and open your gates as encounter, and encourage you to have pen and paper and really write down anything that you really feel prompted to act on and to act immediately. Then we found that is such a key part of, and is another stumbling block, is the listening and not acting. So the first one we want to bring today is around such an important one, and such a fairly new revelation for us as well, but just can't overemphasize this. And that's the whole point about finding a house or a tribe, so that we come into New Jerusalem as part of a tribe, because we know that from Scripture, that is the model. And it can be very hidden in the whole agenda of coming out of traditional church and not being under anyone, and finding your bench and getting an element of independence there. And also really hearing well, you begin to see a bit more of the journey. But what we've realized is that there are a lot not seeing the stumbling blocks, or not seeing the journey. So it's not, we're still in a position where the ecclesia is very immature. It's like a young man. It's come from baby to young man, but not yet progressed to adult or mature son. And so a lot of these stumbling blocks are not being seen across the board. And we didn't see this for quite a few years. So this is why we're declaring it now, because it changes everything. And we could end up with a whole new wineskin of just independent benches, believing that's the biggest blueprint, and that's all there is to it. And we listen to a few fathers here or there. But Bill, do you want to say any more on why a house and tribe?
We travel together. That's the bottom line. We do the journey both individually and as a group, as a family. And there's revelation available in a house that's not available to us individually. I mean, we'd have to find it all ourselves, or as part of a bench. And I just see these major categories of tribes, houses that are doing the journey, and we really, really need to find someplace and settle down and travel with them, we have the advantage and the benefit of getting the revelation that's coming to that tribe and house. There's cross-pollination between houses. I mean, we all listen to various forerunners in the heavenly realms here and there, but there is a need to find fathers to actually be fathered as a son. And this comes down to the difference between being a disciple who is being taught and being a son who is being trained to do the same work that the father's doing in the same house that the father's doing the work. There's a whole lot of folks in heavenly realms that are following a forerunner. They're listening to teaching, they're following a forerunner, and there are many folks in heavenly realms that are calling forerunners fathers, but they do not have a father-son relationship with that forerunner. What they really have is a disciple master, disciple teacher. The word master is King James for teacher relationship. So there's a need to move on from a teacher-disciple relationship, which is following a forerunner, to a son being fathered by a father. And that happens in a house.
And why you've written a page on this, and you've put in a disciple is not a living stone in the house of God. Can you just share a bit more why they aren't?
Okay, well, we've seen that there are 12 strands of DNA. We sometimes call them heavenly cities, not to be confused with New Jerusalem and Zion and so on. And for for Holy Spirit, there's righteousness, peace, and joy. And for the Son, it's the way, the truth, and the life. And we've seen that it's actually the way, the truth, the resurrection, the life, and the light. And coming to the place of coming to doing a journey into life involves having been resurrected. And I see that the resurrection is a father-son thing. There's some of these things, some of these elements of these names of identity that have to do with father-son. I mean, living sacrifice and priest, right? Abraham with a knife in his hand and Isaac as a living sacrifice. Some of these things happen as father-son. They don't happen as teacher-disciple. Jesus called a whole group of disciples, and then after the resurrection, and then he has 12 of those disciples that he calls apostles, and then 70 more. But this coming into life, I don't see happening till after his resurrection. At that point, he's a father. I don't see stepping into some of these levels of identity, some of these names, without having a father-son relationship. I just don't see it happening at a teacher-disciple level. You can get certain things from a teacher teaching you, and you listen to them as a disciple, and you hear what they say. Jesus spoke about disciples hearing and doing, and we'll talk more about that, the need to actually do what you hear and not just hear it. But this father-son relationship, which has to do with being in a father's house, there's elements of this. You can only go so far as a disciple, is what I'm trying to say. You can only go so far as a disciple.
Yes, I mean, I've personally always been raised with this kind of teaching around one-on-one discipling. We used to call it one-on-one discipling. Now we call it begetting sons. But clearly the group doesn't function in the way of a one-on-one. It's very hard to tailor it to your specific needs. Often we all need accountability, and that doesn't happen in groups easily. And so I see it's such a key part of the process, and you're also honoring. And any father wants to get close to their children. They don't want to be, just standing on a podium speaking and having no idea where people are at and what's helping And the more feedback fathers get, the more they can tailor the language, they can speak clearer to where the people are at. If they don't do that, they're in a vacuum, the other people are in a vacuum. And that's not family. It's not family either. And if there are any ecclesias out there or houses listening as well, I'd just encourage you to go beyond teaching, or we've seen teaching is more often, really a better word now is dialoguing, as opposed to just speaking on a platform. That never was the original intention of that word. And in the early church, there always was an awful lot of back and forth dialogue and questioning and why this, and it became very attractive, and people were able to keep their attention, whereas people lose their attention very quickly, often within 15 minutes now, because we have such poor attention spans in today's society. So if you're mainly using this as a teaching or a dialoguing house, I really encourage you to really ask about the whole begetting sons, building up generations, because Abraham was the father of many generations. And we've seen this for a long time. So we've been building generations behind the scenes and working closely and giving a lot of input with emerging fathers. It's taken us away from the bigger platform, so there was a sacrifice there. But we believe that was the ultimate goal, to build many generations in a house. And we're now around the fourth, if not the fifth generation. So after many years, we've actually achieved a significant part of the big picture, we believe. And we don't believe that just schools or any form of platform speaking is the biggest blueprint. You may say, well, that's my gifting, but we've often seen the gifting is the gifting concept is merging now, that we become all the faces and we take on all the functions, and we can do this in an accelerated way. So it moves away from what is your strength, what isn't, to actually, to be honest, the greatest way you will get dependence on the seven spirits and the flow of heaven is working in your weakness. I can honestly say that as a professional coach as well, that's where you work with people, their weaknesses. And you can only grow by compensating for your weaknesses. If they're so strong, they will sabotage the journey and it will make you very unbalanced. So the other point we wanted to bring, Bill, was you said about goals, following up on goals.
Yeah, at the level of well, even teacher, disciple, or father, son, there's a danger of going to a meeting and seeing revelation, and you've spoken about the need to actually receive that revelation right then. In the moment that you have that sense this is truth, receive it, even though you don't have full understanding of it. Do start moving into it. But I'm also seeing the need to actually consciously set a goal to journey into that name, and do follow up with yourself on, let's say, even on a daily basis, to actually make sure you're functioning in that name. Because what I find is, if I'm not doing that, a couple days after the revelation, I've forgotten what I was doing and what I was moving into, and I'm no longer functioning I'm no longer practically moving in on that journey into that name. And then the next meeting, which in some cases can be a month later, I get reminded of what I had intended to step into. Oh yeah, that's what I was doing. Oh, well, I did that for 3 days and then I forgot about it. And here it is a month later. And I could have been in a different place right now, but I'm not, because I let it go and I dropped it. And so I really see the need for printing out pages, for taking notes, for setting goals for yourself. I mean, I've got a notebook by my computer here, and on here I've got notes about tomorrow, about an activation that Jane did for some of the folks on our Patreon that I want to follow up and listen to again tomorrow, because it came to me recently that that's one that I need to do more on than what I did. With reference to being a disciple, Jesus said the disciples are the ones that hear and do. So hearing is not enough. Hearing is part of the way, but then actually doing the revelation that you heard. I mean, bottom line, imagine going to a new job and you hear the training on how to do the new job, but you never actually did any of it. What good would you be to that company or to that employer? Zero. No more good to them than what you came through the door with the skills you had before you arrived. You don't have any of the new skills or training that they trained you on because you heard, but you didn't do. So there's a need to actually take notes and plan your follow-up, set things on your calendar. Don't depend on the Lord reminding you or something in a chat somewhere remind you. Actually do the planning to follow up for yourself.
Yes, and I mean, we would never ever be able to do any jobs if we purely just listened to some instruction and that was it. The best way to learn is just stepping out and beginning this journey and accepting that you may not do it perfectly, but you're on this journey of with the handmaiden of excellence, that you actually want to do an excellent journey, setting your heart, your mind on that, not a sort of out of poor identity. Well, I can't do this, I can't do that, or it needs to be perfect, or I need to have all this revelation. You just get going, and that's the best way to learn. You can also use the Patreon recordings as well as a reminder and the activations of the different places to govern. But what I've found with the journey is the challenge is to begin to recognize where the different places to govern in different mandates, different situations. And there are certain places you go to for certain scenarios, and knowing the difference. Why go to this throne for that? Why go to this? There are certain things that you can do in many places and go to a higher place, but it doesn't necessarily mean the higher is the better, because sometimes it gets so simple. You can just say, well, you're just releasing a frequency or you're releasing light, and you can make your whole journey about releasing a frequency or just releasing light or love on a situation. And that doesn't bring you to maturity of all the different places to govern from and all the different ways in which Father has instituted for us to know how heaven works. And there are so many different places, and I'm currently on a journey of knowing, which throne is for this scenario and which is for that, and asking the difference. And when you're pressing on that journey, I find that it really brings a depth and a maturity, and you really begin to understand a lot of the differences. And one of the other big things we want to bring today is around indecision. A huge stumbling block Father's just shown me in the last week, that there's so much indecision going on in the ecclesia currently. It could be over whether to be in a bench, whether to stay in a bench. It could be over a house, not making a decision around saying you're going to be part of a house. So not giving the full honor to anyone, not giving full honor to a father by saying you're the son of a father. It could be an indecision around your spiritual name, constantly waiting that God's going to reveal it at some time when you're ready, when actually He always wanted you to have a name, and you actually do need a name to go up the mountain. So it never was a situation where you had to wait till you were of this level. It could be indecision about where to help, where to give. So you just stay on I'm open to it, I'm listening to everything, I'm constantly going from this Facebook page to that Facebook page, but you're never really contributing to an ecclesia, and that causes a huge problem and blockages in the ecclesia. And we're back to the old scenario with the old wineskin. it was 20% of the people did 80% of the work. And I can honestly say it's no different in the new wineskin. It's the same scenario. After many years of seeing this, it's exactly the same. So we really have to ask, are we trading poorly by following that same pattern as the old wineskin? Because that led to huge problems, and it led to the ineffectiveness of the old wineskin. It led to burnout of many doing things for wrong motives, because so few would put their hand up. And we did an awful lot around this, trying to change it around, that people did by desire and scroll. But even indecision around your scroll is huge. And that it can be a form of self-protection, where you actually know that if you made any decisions around these things, it would mean this or that. And so subconsciously, it may even be happening right without you realizing it. And it's a form of then of not taking responsibility. And I can honestly say, the more you take responsibility, the more this journey is unbelievably joyous.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, anything else you want to say, Casey or Bill, before we close?
I'm done before the Facebook Live. Casey may have something.
Oh, we can do it after. We can do questions, and this comes along with those, so I'll wait for that.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. We're doing a lot more detail on our intensives, so you're still able to join if you message the Facebook page, or if you're personally connected with us as friends, just message us on Messenger, and it'll be a reduced price for the reduced number of sessions. But we're also looking at doing a following semester, and keeping all this going as an ongoing event. So do think it's a chance for you here to move out of indecision and move into decision about getting some intense help. Thank you.
Okay, I just turned the live stream off, so it's us, and we had a question from Oracle/Catherine. She was asking, can you give us an example of what that would look like, the father, son in a house? And I'll give my testimony here. I was seeing my relationship with Jane as being a father-son relationship, and then probably half a year or so ago, I saw the difference between a teacher-disciple relationship, which is actually following a forerunner, as opposed to the father-son relationship. And at that point, fairly recently, maybe 2 months ago or something, I made a commitment to be a son to Jane and not just follow her as a disciple. Now, the difference I see, the major difference I see, is that when you're functioning as a son, you're functioning in your father's house, doing the same work that your father's doing. And that meant a commitment to put the house first and put that relationship first. That's something that I have to always come back to, balancing it out and making sure that I'm making that a priority. So for me, that was something that I came to within a couple of months. Now I had the benefit of having being coached by Jane all these months, and there was a point at which I finally woke up and realized that I was being coached. There was quite a while that I didn't realize I was being coached. And I honor Jane for the skill that she has and the advantage that I've had because of that. There's places that I am right now that I would not be if she hadn't put that into me, and there's places where I am right now I wouldn't be if I hadn't made the decision to move from following her as a forerunner to actually functioning as her son.
Yeah, and a lot of the time it can look like just daily chatting to each other on Messenger, and maybe getting together every 3 or 4 weeks. But bringing, oh, this is my stumbling block. I'm struggling with this. I mean, I do this with Bill as well, and I do it with others. I've always thought mentors, and there's never once in my life I've ever been without some coach, mentor, because I believe so heavily in the principle. It causes massive acceleration. And once you are humble enough to admit you've got weaknesses and struggling, it really isn't an issue, because everyone struggles. And that's why we've been very open and honest on all our benches. We've put them out to the public because we haven't feared anyone knowing our weaknesses, because your weaknesses become your strengths, in God's terms. Every time you're humble, you're open, you say you're dependent on heaven, that's actually a strength. It's not a weakness. So we have to change around how we view what a weakness is. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, honestly, I would feel completely like a fish out of water if I didn't have anyone to talk things through. The moment Bill and I engage on any topic and we just ask a question, we get the most profound revelation going on between us. It's electric. It really is. And that's how we found any people that pair up, they'll get this beautiful electric revelation going. Plus you build, real deep relationships and family and brothers and sisters. And that to me is just everything. It's part of this journey. It's not, well, I only relate to Father, I only relate to heaven, I only relate to these apostles speaking out there. It's just not a fraction of the journey of doing that.
And we have seen that pair relationship. We've seen many pairs develop, and it's based upon Jesus sending out his trainee apostles in twos, which he did. Paul and Barnabas went out in twos. I mean, it is a biblical pattern. It's part of being trained up, is functioning as part of a two. And we've seen quite a few folks begin to work as a pair relatively early on their journey in heavenly realms, and they've had the advantage and the daily back and forth and the transparency and the openness and the even just that here we are working in a dialogue format where one of us talks, the other talks. That's a great place to start in functioning in your teaching and so on, to function as part of a pair where you're not out there on the tightrope all by yourself, because you've got somebody that you're working with as a pair that can step in at whatever point you need someone to step in, plus all the arcing back and forth with the revelation coming that James mentioned too. So yeah, those folks that have made that, have found that person to pair up with early on, have really, both of them have benefited in their journey.
Yeah. Well, Casey, oh, go on. Yeah.
It's Catherine. That's so important. Thank you for sharing all of that. A question, if not in this group, but I've paired with people on my journey, and it's beautiful, and you become very close, and sometimes you move on, you move on. Now, in this environment, though, it seems that would, I don't know if that's, I'm just making that point, that I am so looking for someone to have that father-son, and I'll pray about that and things like that. And the next part of that is, I see that would be one thing, but it seems to me, with the people in my world, I've kind of become a teacher disciple kind of thing. I've not introduced them to you all yet because it's just so new, but that's why I'm trying to understand the kind of structure, the platform here, so that I can know it, so that I can share it with others, because isn't that what we're trying to do, is share all of this, right? And bring them into their destiny, and right?
Yes, that's
Mm.
awesome. You've already got disciples that you have identified as being your disciples. That's really, really awesome. You come to that place. Um,
But I don't have, you know, this father son because I do feel like I'm out, way out in my own little world out there, which I like. But, you know, I think we all just want someone to just run something by and say, am I, you know, does this resonate, or do you
Mm.
see patterns or weaknesses? I'm all about coaching, Jane. I've always been on teams and sports teams and business teams, and that whole support system does accelerate everything. I mean, that's so
Mm.
I honor the culture here, and but
Mm.
that's what
Yeah.
I'm
If
trying
you're
to.
asking how you kind of move that forward, what I've found is you just begin chatting to people on Messenger and see how much flow goes. You know, how much are they willing to have questions? How much are they willing to open up to you? Is there a rapport building? Do they look at Messenger? A lot of people won't look at them, and so it just doesn't go anywhere. And if it does, you can often begin this for a few months back and forth.
Mhm.
Then you can even then say, you know, do you wish this to go a little bit further and meet up, have a phone call, talk about this sort of concept. And it's not initially, you know, you're not initially putting someone on the spot saying, you know, tell me you see me as a father. Often we don't put pressure on people like that. They just have to come to that realization
Right.
and give you the honor down the track. But yeah, that's how I find it. It often
Okay.
works well. And then you can begin to invite any of your people, you know, to the
Okay.
chats, and they
Yes.
can, you can add anyone. It's all open, and everybody's welcome to add anyone anytime. You don't have to run it through us. Yeah,
Oh,
okay. So we had another question that Casey was going to address. Was that from Helga?
Yeah, and you know, Catherine, it's actually what is really on your heart right now. It's that same question, and I'm going to just read it from the chat because she put it this way. It was that a block for me is a lack of language to adequately introduce friends to this journey that haven't already experienced it in some way. Many of my friends still think in the way Congregational Church does, and almost anything I say will likely seem out there for them. So I'm asking the Lord and you guys how to introduce people in the bite-sized, not so overwhelming chunk. That's exactly where we're going with this, and I'm glad we can talk about it because it's a something we all did. You know, we're finding that this journey goes beyond just sitting and being taught in those four walls of the church. We sort of took another step, going out, maybe listening to teachers again in a conference setting. But I think the biggest block for a lot of people then, and I know I felt it, is thinking that we needed to understand more or understand all of the theology or science that goes uh, behind this before stepping away from the four walls of the church. And really what the scripture says, it doesn't take years or decades of serving in that old system to see that we come away a little discouraged in our individuality. And once we receive our scroll, or even before that, we have the authority to take on our own scroll or walk with the Lord without that so-called covering, the so-called uh, group around us that we've had there for years just for the sake of it. Because where the Lord takes us is relationship. And so if we can look back on our own journey and see where we've come, we can tell those new people, and encourage them to look at how when they can step in to this relationship with the Lord, that is what he is looking for, is relationship, because that moves us into the priesthood of believers that we are. We don't meet in a church anymore, but that necessarily doesn't mean that we aren't that strong. We're actually stronger as a group in the priesthood of believers. You know, this gives OUB these live, you know, we are built of these believers that are perfectly imperfect, and we honor and we learn through that and from each other and from having conversations like this. So I think it's like Jane said, once the conversation starts with those people coming in, it's just sharing your heart and even a little bit of your own journey and what that's been like.
I'm seeing Oracle Dominion's hand, but I wanted to add a little bit to what Casey was saying, and then we'll take the next question. My observation has been that there's some people you can connect with and some you can't. And the real thing I'm looking for when I want to connect with someone is, are they prophetic? Do they already have some hearing and seeing? And if they do, then some of the basic initial encounters, you can facilitate them into encountering their destiny scroll or destiny book, or you can facilitate them into the dance floor or River of Life is a good place to start. Some basic encounters, and the minute that somebody has their first experience of an encounter, they're going to be hooked on heavenly realms and they're going to want more. At that point, you've got someone that is asking for more, as opposed to you trying to tiptoe around and find how to make the connection. So I think the thing to look for is somebody that's prophetic, somebody that hears, somebody that sees, that wants to see more, wants to hear more.
And also on the whole question of how many people do you go after chasing from the old wineskin to bring them into the new, we've really found that it's best just not to do that initially. Move yourself, get strong in your own journey, do governmental acts for people in large numbers, preach the everlasting gospel in heaven, evangelizing people that way, not going after them, trying to share a few concepts that you're not that strong on. They'll probably trigger, you'll end up with some heavy theological debate. You'll probably feel discouraged because you don't know the answer to that question. And it's just, you're on the journey for yourself, going to this highest identity to operate at the highest governmental places, not try and persuade a few to come with you. I mean, in the end, we end up doing things for the whole world. So going after a few people, particularly often our friends, we often want our friends to come in, and we found so many have had to leave them. You know, our close friends did not want this, and that was a cost. But most of this journey starts off with a huge cost. Those that do the journey well pay a huge cost, because it shows, are you willing to do this journey as a living sacrifice? Or are you just wanting, you know, all to be like it was, but with a bit extra? Most of us had to lose our closest friends, but we made some even closer friends, and we made deeper family. And so Father always gives back way more than you give up. So any other questions?
Yeah, so I have a question.
I'm sorry. Gina, can I just take Oracle Dominion? She's had her hand up for a bit.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lydia.
Yeah, I feel for most of the people it's our own stumbling block, because we have the fear of man. So that is what is stopping us from sharing, because I went through that as well. But once I get the mandate that God wants me to do this, I just let go of that fear. I know the fear is there, and then I I do it every time I have a chance. I was so passionate that, I share in a small group, and then it stirred up some debates, and the leader was, not sure. And then eventually she brought this up to the big group, when we invite the author of the book. I think he knows about heaven as well. So there are like hundreds over people. So I feel I didn't know how to share initially. But I just say, okay, since Father gave me this mandate, I want to do it. So I do it my way, and then just go with the flow. And I find that I I can't describe how this is, going to so many people. Like, I didn't realize it. And then when I make a mistake, Father will step in to help me to solve the problem, you see. Sometimes, I don't know how to answer the question, and then someone somewhere will help me, and I see all this is because I overcome my own stumbling block, the fear of man. I see this in
Yeah.
most of the people. Yeah, they want to share. Initially, I also want to share with one or two of my friends, and I find it's not working. I could have heard this from Jane early on. Then, it would have shortened my learning curve. Yeah, and thanks, Bill. I find that is mostly our own fear of man that is stopping us from doing this.
I'm also hearing you, Lydia, talk about a mandate, which another way I could say it is, when you have an open door and when you don't. And God does bring connections, those are the ones that you're looking for, the ones that he brings to you, as opposed to going on and knocking on every door on the street. That's not like to work. That's the shotgun approach. Keeping your eyes open for what he brings, who he brings to you that is ready, that's a different thing. Gina, you had your hand up.
Yes. Hello, all. What I appreciate about this journey is that it is so personal, and then it's collective as well. And it is it is difficult to actually share with people who are in a different place, and in a church setting, an old wineskin. And I just want to ask you, how do you balance? This is my challenge, balancing life and journey, because I actually want to do the journey more than I want to do anything else. Okay.
Yeah, most of us get to that point where the desire to do other things is so much lower that sometimes answers the question as well, because you just don't want to do a lot of other things.
I don't. And so how do you manage that? How do you overcome? Because that's an overcoming thing for me.
But the other thing I do is see it as you're walking with all of heaven in the garden 24/7. So you're not having a quiet time and then you're going off and doing this and that. You're seeking to do stuff as you do your day. So I can be out doing my grocery shopping and I'm thinking about something, or something will spark me. Before you know, I can be doing governmental act while I'm doing my grocery shopping, because it only takes me a few minutes. I might see a headline on Facebook, and I'm suddenly doing something there. I'm going for a walk. I do an awful lot. I'm going for a walk, and I listen. So I exercise at the same time as doing Heavenly Realms. So I listen to podcasts, and then I'll often do a governmental act right there and then on anything that comes up. So it's never waiting for anything. It's just doing it on the spot. So and then whatever time where you've got a little bit of space, doing something maybe mindless, you're just asking, just drawing intimacy to the Godhead, and then just asking them, you know, what have you got for me? And that way you can cope with all this.
The other thing too is the Lord may actually give you a period of time where you're able to concentrate on this on a full-time basis. That sometimes happens. I remember way back when there was a period of time that I was in contact with person after person who had had the opportunity to not have to work for a bit. And even had one person who had been told to quit their job and sell their house, and they did that. And so they had an intense period of time that they used to really, really grow in Heavenly Realms. I mean, that was what they were doing for that period of time. I had the advantage of doing that early on. For me, it was because I was sick enough that I was out of work. And that gave me an opportunity to concentrate on this. And then I had to, for me, the big thing was I had to draw the line and say, I'm not going to get any sicker. I'm not going to go on disability or something like that. There's that temptation, and I fought that successfully and overcame that, because that's the other thing that sometimes happens. You know, you really want something, because this was something for me. I had 25 years, a calling that was 25 years ago at the point that I was at that point. So I was really ready for it at that point. But I'm not saying to make that happen if it's not there, but that opportunity may come where you have a chance to concentrate a period of time and really concentrate for weeks or months or whatever.
Yeah, and some people, you know, make a decision that they are not going to go and work. And I did this as well. I had to get over the fact that I got status from a salary or a job title. And when I got over that, it was really easy. And I gave myself to this. And then there was a period where I was tempted again, should I go back? And I had to resolve, no, this is my calling, and I'm going to rule and govern, that I am free in liberty to do this, and that the finances will support that. And if I'd gone the other way, I probably wouldn't be here today. I'd be, just have compromised on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
But I know this is my fullest destiny, and it's not always going to be, you know, just a one-off decision. It's an ongoing thing of what are you going to sacrifice? I mean, I've sacrificed so many things for this journey, but most, I can honestly say, has been a joyful sacrifice, because I knew my calling on this, and I knew how much the ecclesia needed this. And the rest didn't seem that big. You know, the joy steps in, and eventually giving up this or that didn't seem that big a cost. So anything on the list of stumbling blocks that we've put out there that you didn't understand, or you want to ask further on, or even ones that really hit you as, oh yes, that's good?
You have to, you know, it's diving in. And, you know, when you were saying this, and as we're talking this evening, it is seeking the kingdom first. And that's a different thing for everyone. No, I mean,
Yeah.
and it's constant. I mean, I think about it all the time. So, you know, so I don't know what stage that means I'm in this journey, but
That's good news. Yeah, that's exactly where you want to be. And your hunger is so strong that you've got more and more questions, and all you need to do is look at one little verse, and suddenly a massive hunger comes for knowing this or that. Yeah, that means you're a good stage, Gina. The hardest stage is when you haven't got any hunger, you're distracted, you'd rather watch TV. It all feels complicated language, doesn't mean anything, and that's the tough bit. And what we often say is it's like going up in a space rocket. You know, when they're trying to get rid of the Earth's atmosphere, it's really, really rough, and their body goes through immense shaking and G-force. And then when they get into space, it's calm, smooth, floating, and they're enjoying the beauty of space. We saw that years and years ago. That's what the journey's like. Initially, you're untethering. In fact, that's a concept we've not really spoken a lot about. It's so easy. All you imagine is you tether to this, you untether to that. So untether from the old wineskin, untether from the pulls of the earth in any sense, you know, friends, entertainment, money, job, whatever is causing you to not want heaven. You can imagine you go anti-clockwise. You clockwise to tether to something and anti-clockwise to untether. So as your spiral of DNA, you go anti-clockwise and you say, I'm untethering from this. And this was one of the basic principles most of us learned when we knew nothing else. And it still works. It's still a very good principle of quickly getting rid of all the junk of the world, really.
Mm-hmm.
I want to briefly balance the time that I did spend working. Every bit of it was preparation for what I'm doing now. So there's also that truth as well. And Child of Light, we're going to get to here. I really, really fought that time working because it wasn't what I wanted to do. But the skills that I learned in the job, in the business world, are exactly the skills that I'm using right now, and I had to learn them somewhere because I didn't have them. So that's the other side of the balance on that. Child of Light, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Bill, sorry. I did just want to say thanks both of you for sharing your journeys, because I resonate with both aspects in various ways. But Jane, I think, asked in terms of the stumbling block list, there was something that stood out, and I was really taken back by the believing the book of Revelation is complete. That was really, I've never really seen the book as a complete, but I've encountered many Christians who, you know, are like that. But I just thought that was really, really quite striking and really quite poignant.
Yeah, one of the major things that we've seen in the book of Revelation is that overcoming is one of the major themes in the book, overcoming as a king. And if I had thought that the revelation was complete and wasn't worth going there to look at anything, I would have missed all that revelation about the need to overcome as a king. And that has been a key for me, is coming to a place of overcoming as a king.
Yeah, and what we find is that if you don't know about these stumbling blocks, you're suddenly engaging all these people on Facebook and things, and wow, they hit you with this and that, and you've never heard anyone dialogue about it. And before you know it, we have very mature heavenly realmers that have not opened themselves up to this question and gone really deeply into dialoguing with people, and have just made a decision based on what they've heard one or two people say, and it's completely changed their journey. And so this is why we do really want to talk about a lot of stumbling blocks, because it affects everything, and that is such a massive one. Because I think what happened is a lot of people bought into this AD 70 thing that was going around for many, many years, but they never actually knew what was in the book of Revelation. So then they heard this, oh yeah, okay, yeah, it's finished. And they didn't realize the depth of the revelation in there. And there's so many things in there that don't relate to that AD 70 issue that they have missed such massive parts of the journey. I mean, we have been absolutely addicted to the book of Revelation in our benches. We have been led to passage after passage. Some of us now almost know the book backwards, because we've had so many profound places we found in the book of Revelation. And I can see many houses missing out on that because they've made quick conclusions, and people then following them because a house leader has said, I don't believe in this, and they've written it off very, very quickly. So this is where being open to and laying down any doctrine you have is so important to the journey. If you don't, on every single issue, you'll probably get sabotaged on something, because every revelation we have found has actually either been starkly different from what we were taught, or at least a lot deeper. And we can write off so much quickly.
Two very brief points on the revelation of Jesus Christ. First off, that is the full title. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's the revealing of Jesus Christ. That's what the book's about. And Christ is King, so it's revealing Jesus as the King, which also reveals our kingship because we're one with him. That's the big thing about the revelation of Jesus Christ. And the second thing is it's a book full of visions, and every one of those visions is an encounter waiting to happen. Chapter 1, the throne, the Son of Man. Chapter 4, the throne room. Chapter 4, the throne room encounter is right there in chapter 4, waiting for us to just turn the switch on and have that encounter. Chapter 19, riding the white horse. It's not just Jesus that rides the white horse, we do too. There's an encounter, so it's encounter after encounter after encounter, just waiting for us to turn the switch on and believe for and step into, and it will just go once you believe to step into it. So that book is full of revelation about who Jesus is and who we are. Samson, I saw you get ready to ask a question there for a moment. Still have that same question? Sometimes people step away briefly. Sometimes people have family in the background. But don't hesitate to ask at some point. Oracle Dominion says, how to operate like lampstand in all realms.
Yeah, I just got that yesterday, actually. I suddenly realized that we become the lampstand, and it's been such a mystery of what does it mean. And one of the things we're seeing is that it means that you're basically the lampstand is like the Jewish candlestick, and all those points represent a different realm in heaven. I suddenly got revelation as I was actually becoming the lampstand, standing there. I realized that it's because we actually were operating in all the realms. So starting from the kingdom of the earth, the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, and then they're sort of under heaven. So they're when you're really in the outer realms of what heaven is. Not a lot of intimacy. You're seeing some concepts, but you're in this sort of outer areas. And then there's heaven of heavens, perfection, and then eternity. And on the side of that, then there's also infinity, and then there's new earth. And New Jerusalem's like the center of the infinity sign, which oscillates from eternity right to infinity through New Jerusalem. You see, is the way, and why it's the way, from the way, the truth, and the life. And then it all goes into and becomes new earth. So there are many who are operating in the courts, and that's their only experience. Certain of the courts, presented to courts of chancellors, mobile court, but that's the only realm they know. Then there are others that have seen all sorts of other things, libraries, scroll rooms, chancellors' houses, this and that. So they're beginning to operate in different realms, but they're still not huge intimacy, not seeing God face to face. And then there are certain thrones that become a lot more about the abode of God, where he really resides and lives. And so that's why we need to keep exploring. And a lot of these different thrones, we found this immense city of holiness where, wow, that is one of the most intimate face-to-face encounters with Father there. And a lot of houses haven't explored the concept of New Earth because they haven't really seen the timeline issue. But when you get the concept in your head that you need to be operating out of New Earth now, not just in heaven, so everything's merged as heaven and earth, then you incorporate that in your experience. And it all feels very overwhelming when you're in the transition. But eventually you find like a way of operating in all these realms in different contexts. You're here one time, you're here there, or you actually overlap. So a lot of us now overlap New Jerusalem in New Earth. And we operate out of New Jerusalem on New Earth, or Zion on New Earth. Or we release from the what was eternity into and through New Jerusalem into New Earth, with us sat on New Earth on the ground, and then we receive what we've released from eternity, and you grow into these greater and greater functions. But if you only look at it as all linear, you know, oh, there's this place in heaven, there's that place in heaven, and they're all the same, that they're not.
The actual encounter of being the lampstick is really quite something too. There's a flow of olive oil. There's a burning of the olive oil. There's the seven spirits of God, the seven flames before the throne of God. The actual gold of the lampstick, excuse me, through which the oil flows, has to do with coming into a function of the spirit and a function of the seven spirits. And even just as you began talking about, or even just asking the question about the lampstand, I can feel the oil in me flowing, the olive oil flowing, has to do with seven rivers in heaven, and actually becoming each of those flow, one of them which is oil and one of which is gold. So there's a bit of a journey before you actually get to functioning at the lamps as a lampstand. But it's something to look forward to, and it's also a perfect example of the revelation of Jesus Christ, because that lampstand's in the revelation of Jesus Christ. It speaks about it there, and it is an actual a function that we function in.
I have a question. So how do you challenge yourself? This is getting back to, you know, making sure that you challenge the dogma or the, what do you call it, Jane? The old stuff that you have functioned in. How do you challenge them? How do you know that you're functioning in old ideas or ways? Yes.
How do you know you're functioning in old ways?
It'll have a staleness to it, just because it's old. I mean, there's old that's actually old wineskin, and it's how the church has functioned over hundreds of years or more. But actually, even your heavenly realm functions can get to where it's time to move on to something more. Gina, there's something in us that says there's got to be more, and I want it. When you got that, it's time to move on. And
I hear that.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think you've got a large dose of that. So I'm sure you resonate with that. There's gotta be more,
absolutely.
and I want it. That's when you know it's time to move on. You just have that. I come to that place rather regularly. I mean, that's what got me out of the old wineskin church. I actually was probably out for 10, 15 years before I even came into Heavenly Realms. I mean, I was out there in the desert for quite a while, having come out and not yet having gone in to the next. And that other thing is the sea of glass in heaven, in the throne room scene where the elders are casting their thrones upon the sea of glass. There's this repeated thing where you come to that place on the sea of glass, and I don't know exactly what my old theology is, but I'm giving it up right now. I'm trading it in. I want to see the new stuff. I want to see the truth. I'm trading it in without even knowing what it is. I'm giving it up. And there's a regular experience of doing that, of trading in my old understanding for a newer, more complete and fuller understanding. It's like trading in the 2007 car for the 2020, you know? It's a really good thing to do that and to do it regularly.
Casey, do you have anything else on that? It's a big, good question.
No, I like how it's come around full circle, though.
Yeah, it's I often find as well, if you don't want to let something go and you get triggered, you hear of somebody talk about concept and you're triggered and you're like, oh, I don't like that. That's the time to begin to lay whatever you've heard or whatever you've believed down, and then often you'll change and you'll want to explore at least the new concept that you've heard. And you might not fully agree with what someone's saying, but often I found that we end up believing and growing into that concept we've heard. And we'll often misunderstand initially and trigger and say, oh, how could they say this? What about this and this? But you'll get deeper revelation down the track of it and then see the wisdom of it. And it's sort of a constant letting go. Virtually everything is old. So I think that's the other thing.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Yeah, I was staggered at how we had got wrong. So, I mean, we got wrong the gospel, you know? I mean, it clearly was so much poor trading that had hidden massive truths for years. The same as when in the 15th century, they couldn't see salvation through faith. You know, these huge concepts can get so blocked. So there is barely anything that hasn't been reframed in a massive, massive way.
Well, I'm thinking of manna, and if you tried to save it for the next day, it stank. Give us this day our daily bread, you know? There's always fresh revelation every day. And there's a trading in on the old because we see in part. I mean, we see more parts, but we still see in part until we finally see in whole. We see in whole when we're mature. Diane asks, what does one trade with on the sea of glass? And the answer is that biblically, the 24 elders are trading their golden crowns on the sea of glass. And my sense is they keep getting it back enhanced with greater authority and so on. But the trade that I'm making there on the sea of glass, or not even necessarily doing it there, but just making a trade, is of all that I currently understand and all that I currently am. That's what the elders are doing. They're trading in who they currently are for an enhanced version with more truth, more authority, more revelation. Child of Light asked, does the father-son relationship you spoke about, Bill, work out as equal responsibility and more authority for the son within the house? There's plenty of places within the house to function in authority. There's plenty of work that needs to be done. There's plenty of people that need to be taught or need to be fathered. Jane has a way of letting people just do what they're able to currently do. I haven't felt squashed in her presence, though she definitely is the one that founded this, and it is her house in the sense that she's the first father. I mean, Abraham is Abraham, right? And Isaac's Isaac, and Jacob's Jacob. I mean, Abraham's before, he's the generation before Isaac, and Jacob is the generation after Isaac. So I'm definitely second generation, she's first. But I'm functioning in a way that's equal in the house, but it's also with deep respect for who Jane is and where she's been and the price she's paid to get to where she is and what she's doing and also what she's done for me. So I haven't felt squashed by her. That she's there. We don't function over somebody. So we're not covering over somebody. We're not over somebody. We're working with somebody. But at the same time, you have respect for who they are and where they've gotten to on their journey and what it cost them to get there.
Yes, because we did have people saying, not that long ago actually, experienced people going, well, aren't we all equal? Therefore, we've all paid a sacrifice. Therefore, it really doesn't matter, you know, what you've done before and what I've done. And we got fresh revelation on that it's like saying, well, I paid the same as the 12 disciples. Well, did anyone give up their lives? No one yet has currently given up their lives. So we haven't paid. We haven't had the persecution, the trying to operate when barely anyone understands a new wineskin like they did. And I think that's why we have to have this immense honor of the forerunners, and not just say, oh, well, you're just as equal as me. Because that's how we hear real immense truth. And we also honor the fact they have gone and operated in an environment that's so much tougher than we have, because they've been opening and doing governmental acts for years to allow us to get to this next stage. And that's why I have immense, profound respect for all the just men made perfect. I don't equate myself at all on, oh yes, you know, I've been through exactly the same as you. I know I haven't. They foreran things in an environment that was exceptionally hostile. You'd be stoned to death if you stepped out. And I think it's because of that humbleness that I was able to get immense revelation from them at a time when hardly anyone was giving out that revelation. If I had come in very proud, I probably wouldn't have got half the way on the journey. And when you've actually been on that journey yourself, you know how painful it was. I mean, the environment I was in years and years ago was, I mean, I've put up with the most immense hostility and rejection and lack of interest and you name it. You know how much you've been through, and you will do that, and then somebody else will come along thinking, oh, you know, oh yes, I get everything you're saying. I'm equal. I'll make a quick judgment on what you said, dismiss it, move away from you in seconds. And you know that they don't have the maturity of character to realize that is not a good way to operate. And the maturity of character is one that really takes the truth, takes time to go away and ask, doesn't trigger, doesn't move away, lays it on the altar, maybe takes years to come to a conclusion on a major issue. that's a mature son. And the danger with this new wineskin is we focus so much on identity and freedom, and we've raised up a lot of people who are very confident now in who they are and their ability to hear. But the downside is they don't necessarily have the maturity, the humbleness to realize the other side, that there is still got an awful long way to go.
I just share that the journey for me is 31 years at this point, since the point that I received the Holy Spirit. And I remember that within a year of receiving the Holy Spirit, I was completely, everything fell apart. I was going back to mom and dad with $25 in my pocket. So this has not been easy, and it's taken a long time. When I received my calling as an apostle, I thought it was going to happen tomorrow. I mean, I got married a year after the calling, and I was telling my wife I'm an apostle. And 10 years later, she's well wondering, where's that apostle thing you were talking about? So this is quite a long journey, and for me, but just like Jane was saying, the thing, picture the geese in the V, right? The one up front is doing a whole lot of work that the ones that are falling behind don't have to do. The geese actually switch who's up front, so that the one up front doesn't get worn out. But Abraham goes before, and I mean, forerunning is forerunning. Honor your fathers and mothers, right? That it may be well with you and you may live long in the land in which I am sending you to. There really is something there that when you do honor, you do get in line and receive the benefit of the work that's been done in the years, and it means that you're standing on the shoulder of someone who's actually gone before, and you don't have to start from square one. The reason for me that it was 30 years is because I was starting from square one. It's an entirely different thing to come after the person that starts it from square one. And the thing that's missing in so much of our society today, and is missing in all of our churches, is the father-son generational thing, where the father passed on to the son the benefit of all that they've done and learned, and the son doesn't have to start from the beginning. In the society that I grew up in, pretty much everybody went to school and had to start from square one. Everybody was always starting from the beginning. Every generation started from the beginning. And the few families out there that were functioning in generational, financially functioning generationally, and not just giving the money to the second generation, where the second generation turns into a waster of money, but actually building wealth over generations. You could just imagine the benefit of someone being the third generation Rockefeller, or the third generation Ford, whatever. Whereas all the rest of us were all functioning, starting over from generation one. Everybody's starting with generation one. You go to school, you get a job, you move away to where the job is, and you start from square one. And this whole thing about generations of fathers and sons is a wonderful thing. I saw early on that the links of father-son relationships had been broken way back when. I mean, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on. There was a point, I think it was in Ephesus, where the emperor, or no, it was the Pope, wanted the elders in that city to do what he wanted them to do. And what they told the Pope was, no, that's not what John taught us. they were like third or fourth generation, and they remembered what John taught them, and they'd been building ever since then, and they were not about to give all that up for what the Pope was trying to tell them to do. Because the generations of fathers and sons were still functioning at that point, but the point came at which that chain was broken. And there's scriptures in Malachi where the hearts of the fathers will be turned to the children, and the hearts of the children will be turned to the fathers. And John the Baptist came in the spirit and power of Elijah, the fathers and the sons. That father-son generational thing has been restored to the ecclesia, and it is a wonderful thing. I mean, all of us have that I don't want to be told what to do, I don't want to be controlled, and that's not father-son. That's not telling someone to do it. It's benefit of experience. So anyway, it's a really good thing to be restored into the ecclesia, and it's a really good thing to take your place in the generations.
Yeah, and I think it's been underemphasized in our time, in our education as well, and it is a struggle for many. But we'll be talking more about the Elijah mantle because it's so key. Probably next week, actually. And the other thing is, if you don't understand people as well, that often means that you're really not honoring them fully. So what we found is, it's a huge one for all of us. You know, we all just don't understand each other's language. And the reason is because of all the wrong trading. It's like the Tower of Babel situation. We've all got different language where we actually should be all using and understanding these terms. But because a lot of these terms have got lost, we don't understand the language. But what you have to do is, rather than run away and say, well, I don't understand you, I'll just find somebody else I can understand, is persevere in that relationship and really go away and honor them. And the more you honor, the more you'll understand their language. It's a spiritual principle. It really works, but a lot don't get that. And they're just constantly trying to go around and find someone they can understand a bit more. But eventually, we should all be talking the same language. Okay, well, we should probably finish there if everyone's okay with that. Nothing else to add before we close? No, all good?
Okay,
Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah.